So unfortunately, I have 15 minutes, and I have arrived with about 35 minutes of material. So I usually solve that problem by talking really fast and occasionally skipping over stuff. Okay, so that'll be our approach. This first slide I won't spend a lot of time on because I think we probably all, in the introductory comments and maybe in our experience, the 50% of you, approximately 50% of you who seem to be policy-oriented probably are aware of this, that there's a huge need out there, right? This is a fact that a data point that we use to illustrate that point, which is some survey work that our founder, Professor Peter Tufano of the Harvard Business School, conducted about a year ago, went out in, I think it's 14 countries to ask people, could you come up with $2,000 in 30 days, beg, borrow, or steal. And the results in this country are, to us, just astounding. Regardless of income, less than half the population is pretty confident they could come up with $2,000 in a month. And that's not taking it from savings, right? That's borrowing it, that's advancing it on your credit card, that's going to your friends and neighbors, it's working more hours, whatever it might be. This is a nice way to crystallize how vulnerable we are as a country, right? If we're, half of us are walking around one serious car repair away from financial disaster, this is not a good thing. And we have to believe that financial education has got a role to play, right? So hopefully we're all there, that there's a need. But when we think about this enormous challenge, what we found is that a lot of the conversation naturally goes to the question of supply. So we have this need, and our challenge then is to figure out how to make more financial education available more broadly. A supply issue, right? And we can think about how to increase its availability, how to bring down its cost to deliver, and so forth. But what we want to do is get us focused a little bit more on the demand side. And we heard a little bit of that in the introductory comments this morning. I think it was Michael Collins who was saying, there's this mismatch between who needs better financial decision-making skills and who kind of shows up and says, I want some information. Another way to say that is there's just not sufficient demand or appetite. People don't necessarily take advantage of the resources that are out there. So we need to focus on that. We can't be just focused on how we get more stuff out there. And then lastly, and certainly we've heard that this morning, we got to keep focused on this question of impact. Whatever we're doing, is it actually changing people, particularly changing their behaviors and leading to better outcomes? So we're here to talk about a kind of a different approach to that. And I should say that in contrast to many of the people who are organizations that are part of this effort, we were in this fortunate spot of being able to actually build some stuff before we got to the research. So we're a little different. It's not just classic research. And to get us into the mood, so to speak, and if I can pull it off, I'm going to play for us a little 60-second trailer. Okay, so why am I showing you that? Well, obviously it's fun to brag about the stuff we've worked on, but more importantly, if you stop and think in your mind's eye of, who is this mythic consumer that needs to think more about retirement savings, right? So picture that person, whoever it is. For many of us, it's probably going to be a younger person. It need not necessarily be, but how are we going to reach that person, right? Is it people like us, really earnest, who are going to talk about, great curricula and research findings? This is probably not the way that we're going to, at scale, back to that model, drive up the demand, right? We need a different approach. At least that's our starting assumption. So let's talk for a minute about what that approach has been. Financial entertainment. This is the term we use now. And the key elements here are, rather than being really earnest about all the good we're going to do for people, we want to lead with engaging, something that reaches out and grabs you, right? So hopefully the video does that or explains our thinking on that. Secondly, and we heard some of these comments also this morning, we're going to scale back our expectations. Our approach to thinking about financial literacy is not trying to make all of us perfectly informed consumers, right? If I said to you, How many people are interested in learning how to make a good pumpkin pie for next week? All right, I'm not going to make you raise your hands because maybe it won't work out the way I want it to. But thank you. Thank you. But if I said, how many people want to sign up for a cooking class where we're going to cover the basics of French cooking, we're going to talk about baking, we're going to cover, how you get the right ingredients, and my guess is that the number of people who want to do that and are prepared to show up for 8 or 10 weeks for a couple of hours is far smaller, right? So you get the analogy here. We don't necessarily have to get people with every single topic. And so that's what we think we can do with financial entertainment, is we can come at folks with a particular issue or a particular decision they need to make and give them, if you will, a much more bite-sized dose. It's important that that be interactive rather than static. As adults, we have generally low tolerance, despite the fact that you all are sitting here listening to us, so maybe this is a counterpoint. But in general, adults are less likely to be comfortable sitting, listening, passively taking in information. And we need to make sure that whatever we have, whether it's entertaining or otherwise, is widely accessible, right? So technology lends itself to that. We don't want people to have the benefit of an opportunity solely because they happen to live in a community where someone has organized, the large cooking class. Why games? Well, again, and our audience is adults, which I'm not sure I've been clear about. We think about how adults learn. We generally learn by doing something, right? So that's what games have us do. We are involved in the playing of the game. We learn through getting quick and very clear feedback, right? So you try something, it works, okay, that's good. We try something, it doesn't work, okay, that does, I understand that's not what I want to keep doing. We learn through repetition. We learn through the pride of accomplishment. I have a picture of the Rubik's Cube there because it's a little dated, but when you solve the puzzle, whatever the puzzle might be, one of the things we get out of that is just a little bit of self-confidence, just a little bit of, hey, now I feel good. So we think about that in the context of financial education, especially for vulnerable consumers, which is what we're focused on, who probably haven't had a lot of good experiences in their personal finance. If we can give them a 15 or a 30-minute opportunity to solve the puzzle, they walk away, and we have data for this, with a much greater sense of confidence, which is so important to making good decisions. And finally, games lend themselves to a social piece, right? That whether it be technology-enabled or simply walking around the water cooler in your workplace saying, hey, my high score was this, there is a way in which gameplay encourages a social connection. Now, why do we go then from games to video games, and even more specifically to a niche in the video game world called casual games? Well, the first point, which many of us found surprising when we started exploring this work, is that nearly 3/4 of Americans are playing some form of video game, right? A lot of us tend to think of video games as a young male activity that's really time intensive. I kind of joke about the kid in the basement with the bloodshot eyes and the half-drunk bottle of soda and maybe a bag of chips, right? It turns out that's not really who is playing games in this country, or it's much broader than that. So as an example, in this area of casual video games, or now increasingly called social games, the typical average player is a 43-year-old female. So that's not who we necessarily think of. So casual games, good way to reach people. They are inherently accessible. More and more we're seeing people playing them when they're waiting for the bus on a mobile device and so on. So a very good match for trying to reach people. Part of our take on this is that we want to have not one game. We want to have a library of these things. Again, back to the idea of targeted rather than comprehensive. So, it may be that you're thinking about whether to sign up for your company's 401k, and you may go and play Bike Club, which you've just seen the trailer for. Another time, you may have decided that, in fact, you are interested in learning a little bit more about what a household budget is and how you might put one together. We have a game called Groove Nation, which is about dancing and using a budget to make your way to stardom in the world of dance, right? So maybe that's the right fit for you at that moment. So we want to have this library. So far, we have 5 titles, 4 that are completed, and a 5th one that will be out early next year in this emerging library. Rather than walk through all the details, I would encourage you to stop by our booth in the lobby where you can see 2 of the games, the ones we've worked with under this project. Here's where I will start the talking fast. One of the key things that we've learned is that building these things can't be done in a vacuum. So we're very deliberate about taking input from and building into the process an opportunity to get input from the target player. You can see an actual picture there of a test session. I've spoken to you about Bike Club, which focuses on retirement. The other game that we've built as part of the Financial Literacy Consortium is called Farm Blitz, focused on teaching people about the value of saving and compound interest and how debt can really get a hold of you. Here again, I'm going to ask you to come and check out the booth to learn the details of Farm Blitz. You can actually try it. It is built on the mechanic that sits beneath Farmville and Bejeweled, two of the most popular games out there. So if anybody is a game player or knows one, those are names that they would recognize. As I've mentioned, the goal is to help people focus on debt and saving. So then the question then becomes, if these things are in fact of some use, which we'll talk about in a sec, how do we get them out broadly? And we have been working on distribution testing with different channels. Some of them are listed here: financial institutions, employers, schools, primarily community colleges, government at the state and local level so far, nonprofits of various different kinds, and the military. And if you think about it, each of those channels, there are partners, if you will, that have an interest in making sure their customers or their employees or their service members or their citizens are better prepared to make financial decisions. So we are big believers in evaluation. It's unfortunately, as many people involved in this effort understand all too well, it's complicated and expensive. What we have done so far is focus on the immediate impact following gameplay. And so we've been able to run pre and post testing on reasonably small samples and say, if you come in and you sit down and you tell us both in terms of your self-confidence and your knowledge where you are at point one, and then we let you go loose on the games for some period of time, could be a half hour, could be 45 minutes, and then we ask you the same questions: can we see some change? Some change. And the answer is yes, we can. We've chosen to put up some figures here from Farm Blitz. These are on player self-confidence. You can see the yellow is a strong improvement. We feel the green is stronger. There are some dummy questions in there to try and make sure that we're not just detecting overall lift. And then even more impressive to us was the lift in knowledge, right? So you can see, again, some of the figures there, even as high as above 50% improvement. However, more work needs to be done. What we do not yet have is nice data that ties that to people's real-world financial decisions. We have designs in mind to do that, and it's one of our priorities going forward. But we think it's really promising to be able to see these measurable changes after a fairly light intervention, if you will, and also one that people will do quite willingly, right? We don't have to drag people in. We have anecdotal stories of people coming in to be involved in these tests and us having to literally pull them away, and it's time to turn off the lights. So we think when you think about where the opportunity is, that's a tremendously powerful starting point if we can come up with products that grab people enough that they want, if you will, a bigger dose. Okay, so we're at the 1 minute mark. So I think I'll wrap up and simply say, coming up in 2011, we will be adding this 5th title. We have more deliberate outreach to Spanish-speaking markets, and we're very pleased to continue to be part of this effort. If you'd like more information, if you think you might be a potential distribution partner for us in particular, we'd really like to talk to you, and you can find us at the booth out in the lobby. Okay? Thanks very much.
Thank you.